Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon. My name is Jay Gullish. I lead USIBC's digital programs. And for those of you who know what we do, every now and then we have a little fun. Today's conversation on the tale of Holy is one of those exciting, colorful conversations that really represent the broadness, robustness, and frankly, the vitality of the US-India relationship. Media and entertainment, content creation, gaming, AV, those are things that we've always wanted to lean into at USIBC, and we're really pleased to have I dare say, a very exciting and fun and interesting conversation today. Not only do we have some of India's Oscar nominees, we have folks who work on audiovisual, and we also have the pleasure to more formally announce an ongoing webinar series around media and entertainment. In the virtual setting, I always like to take a moment and help develop a community of interest. So what I'm going to do right here and now is I'm going to ask anyone who's camera ready or perhaps not camera shy, just to come on screen so we get a sense of the community. And then shortly, I'm going to hand it off to Nishit Desai, our partner in crime, so to speak, our knowledge partner and lead on media and entertainment services, to formally kick off the session. Just to give you a little bit of structure, once again, this is on, we are being recorded here, so this is a public on the record conversation. We will make it available afterwards. The first portion of the webinar will be on the Oscars, and then the second portion will be on audiovisual, and then we'll get into some other regulatory activities around the media and entertainment space in the US-India corridor. Now I'm going to ask for people that are not speaking to go off video. Please put yourself on mute. And I'm going to hand it over to Aparna Gore from Nishit Desai Associates to formally kick us off. And let me just say, I want to thank two people in particular. I want to thank Tanisha from Nishit Desai, and also Meta J. Shankar, who is our media and entertainment co-chair. We could not have organized this exciting and fun event without the two of you. So thank you both. And with that, Aparna, I'm handing the microphone over to you.
Thanks a lot, Jay, and hi everyone. Thank you. Thanks a lot for joining. I'm going to try and sound as enthusiastic as Jay, but I'm a lawyer, so I may just be a little boring. So, before we jump into the specifics of the webinar, I'm going to just talk about a little bit about where the Indian M&E sector is right now and where we see things going. Especially for the benefit of some people who may be joining us for the first time, in relation to M&E related activities, right? As we all know, it's quite a dynamic sector. It's growing very, very rapidly right now. We are seeing a lot of foreign OTT platforms, in fact, a lot of US-based OTT platforms entering in the Indian market. This has not only brought in more content options for Indian viewers, but also has created opportunities for Indian filmmakers to create content for a global audience. There are also a lot of collaborations between Indian and foreign production houses. We are also seeing foreign films being shot in India. In the past, there have been some very big projects like the Dark Knight Rises. We also had Tenet, and both are big films from big production houses like Paramount and Warner, which were shot in India. In fact, very recently, the Indian government also introduced certain cash schemes for encouraging foreign collaborations in the Indian film industry. We will be talking a little bit more about these schemes a little later. One more very interesting aspect is the AVGC task force, the promotion task force, which was formed in 2022 to look into the challenges faced by the AVGC sector. When I say AVGC, I mean animation, visual effects, gaming, and comics, and the potential for growth of the sector. And the AVGC sector, in fact, is pegged to serve as a major growth driver for the M&E industry in India. Lastly, and something that's very exciting, we're very excited about this today. India's presence at the Oscars and other various other prominent award functions has grown tremendously over the years. This year we have 3 nominations from India at the Oscars. Indian filmmakers continue to push boundaries and make thought-provoking films which have made their mark across the world. I will now hand over to Medha to introduce our first guest and just start this segment.
Thank you so much, Aparna. Hello, everyone. Greetings from LA. It is 7 in the morning, but I'm very pleased to be up to introduce everyone here. Because it is 7 in the morning, we were unable to get some of the other Oscar nominees who are here, but I have the great pleasure of introducing Pan Nalin and Dheer Momaya, who made the amazing film Last Film Show, I'm sorry. And they'll tell you more about their Oscar campaign. They were the first Indian film to be shortlisted for the Oscar Foreign Film category from India for many, many years. I am very keen to share what they've learned and what we at USIBC can do to help in terms of policy and help facilitate the next time they get nominated. So thank you very much, guys, for coming to join us today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, we're glad to be here.
Very quickly, before we get into questions, Nalin and Dheer, if you just want to introduce yourselves to everyone here and also describe your previous work as well, and also your work that you've done in terms of cross-border work between India and the US.
Yeah, my name is Pan Nalin. I am a writer, director, and sometimes forcefully happens to be producer as well when I don't have Dheer Momaya around. So yeah, I've worked both fiction and non-fiction. I've done documentaries, and most of the films I've done have been co-production with international partners like France, Germany, Italy, Japan. And the Last Film Show is India-France co-production. Yeah, so that's where we are. The last project was the Last Film Show, India's entry to the Oscars.
I'd just like to add to that, saying I'm Dheer Momaya. I'm the producer of Last Film Show. And I think from a US that we had a major US distributor called Samuel Goldwyn Films, who acquired Last Film Show for theatrical distribution in North America, in the United States and Canada. It was, I think, the first time that Samuel Goldwyn Films acquired an Indian film, leave aside a Gujarati film. And what we have seen is that there are a few distributors in the US that distribute Bollywood films or Tollywood films, and their focus has always been around Indian diaspora pockets. But with Last Film Show, what we saw was not only in the US, but in Japan, in Spain, in Italy, in Germany, and maybe 20 other territories. We had major local distributors who looked at bringing it to non-diaspora audiences, which has been quite an incredible journey and learning for us as well.
Thanks so much. And I will be passing the mic on to Jay, who will be asking our first question and kicking off this Q&A with you.
Yeah, great. So my first question is there a genre, an Indian American genre? Is this something that actually exists, or is it Indian stories that resonate globally with Americans, or American stories that resonate globally with Indians? Is there something culturally about the Indian American experience or Americans' perception of India that makes it a unique genre in and of itself?
Nalin?
Well, my take is very personal, I would say, but I don't think there is anything like Indian American kind of genre movies or stories. I do feel there is still a big divide in the way we tell our story and the way we consume and the way America, or mainly the Hollywood, makes movies and the way they are distributed. I personally see very big divide. I mean, a lot of Indian movies become pretty big in the US, bigger box office number, but then it's very often is limited to the diaspora, South Asian diaspora. You have millions of Indians and people from Pakistan, Bangladesh, Arab world. They will flock. But when I've traveled sort of deep into the interiors, I don't see that kind of awareness about Indian cinema in the US. And this goes same for the Europe, I would say. It's very limited, yeah, what we know. And I would say also the same way we do, I mean, as a Indian spectator, especially the urban spectator, know a lot more about American cinema, American film directors, American actors, musicians. We know really much more, as much as sometimes we know about Bollywood. I'm talking about the urban India, which could be around 300, 400 million people. But that's not the truth in the other way around. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. You met, go ahead, dear, do you have something to add to that?
No. I was just going to say that, there's been generations of crossover films that have been produced out of India, hoping to find American audiences and to find non-diaspora audiences. But I think we're just beginning to sort of hemorrhage into the market. There have been a few directors which have used American, superstars, pairing them with South Asian actresses or actors, and those have sort of found non-diaspora audiences, but I don't think it's happened in the scale that it could.
Yeah, thank you. I think both of you mentioned storytelling, right? I kind of feel that movies and entertainment is clearly a way to tell a story. And it's a personal question. How did you get into this? Have you always been a storyteller, or did you fall into it? How did you first know when you wanted to be in media and entertainment and be a storyteller?
Okay, for me anyway. For me, it started with beginning to tell lie to my parents, So then, to hide one lie, you have to create another and another, and in no time you become a storyteller, So, I mean, the storytelling sort of came to me at a very young age because the region where I come from in India, there's a big tradition of storytellers, who come to your villages in the evening. They have a harmonium and they just tell stories. And sometimes they can captivate audience for 3 to 4 hours, just by singing and telling stories. Then, of course, I was mesmerized by the cinema. And I would say generally in India, like many other rich culture, the storytelling is pretty big, deeply ingrained part in Indian culture, whether it's mythological story, whether it's gossips about the neighbors, whether it's, urban stories, the myths, I think we do love telling stories. And I don't think there is any other country which has so many storytelling traditions across every state in every different languages. Cinema happens to be just one of them since 100 years, but the storytelling tradition has been pretty much alive. So I did fall in love with storytelling at very early age through cinema and through where I grew up.
Yeah, I think that there's a certain dopamine kick that you get when you're telling a story, and at least for me, and I guess for most people who take storytelling up as a profession, when you see people's face light up when they hear your story. And for me, kind of like Nalin, it started off very young when I used to be called Thapod, which in Gujarati means someone who fibs stories, and just makes up stuff to entertain people. And I remember telling my grandmother once when I was probably only 3 or 4 years old, giving her a past life regression story, telling her how I've seen my own past life. And she got really excited and almost cried and went and told everyone in my family until they told her that, oh, this is every day. Every day it's a new thing with him. So don't pay much attention to it. So I think for some people that the knack starts early, and then you realize that people are falling for your stories and they believe you, even though it all sounds quite ridiculous. And then you realize that cinema or film is also just another version of make believe, and it's how much you can make people believe your story. And so I think film, like Nalin said, is just one of those outlets to tell a story. And like look at for example, and if you watch Last Film Show, one of my favorite lines in the film, Cello Show, which is our movie, the one that Nalin and me made. One of my favorite lines that Nalin has written is that the future belongs to storytellers, and that everyone must tell stories to get by in life. Rich people tell stories to hide their wealth. Politicians tell stories to win votes. And what was the last one, Nalin? The third one?
I think the businessmen tell stories to sell their product.
Yeah. So I think it's the base of most professions today.
And apparently children tell stories to get out of trouble from their parents.
Exactly.
That's good to know as a father. So Meta, you're a bit of a storyteller too. How did you get involved? And then I'll turn it back over to you.
Oh, I got involved because I think my parents wanted to shut me up, so they put me in front of the TV all the time to entertain me. And I would watch 5 movies in a row, and no one, that was my films and movies and TV content was my babysitter for many, many years.
Wonderful.
So I had the honor of sort of being on the sidelines, watching you guys campaign for the Oscars, and it was very fascinating. I learned a lot just watching you guys. So I want to ask you about the challenges you faced as you were campaigning. I mean, I remember, to this audience, I was once with Nalin in one part of town in LA, and then Dear had to go attend to another. There were 2 or 3 screenings going on at the same time. They had to multitask. You guys had a screening almost every day to help campaign for this film. And what are some sort of American businesses challenges you had along the way? And we at USIBC, we like to help ease business between the 2 countries. So what were some of the things and policies that can help in the future for the next time you're nominated? For instance, I know your actor had to get a US visa, and there were all sorts of obstacles. So if you can overall just walk us through the journey of your campaign and what challenges you face, what you overcame, and what you would like to us to help with in the future.
I think Dheer, maybe go ahead.
No, I can begin, and then Nalin, I know your insights on this are way more valuable than mine. But yeah, I think that running an Oscar campaign is nothing short of running a political campaign. The war rooms, the statistics, the voting base and analytics, all of that is very similar. It's sort of what we had to go through our process and what everyone else does. In fact, other people probably do it way better than us because of the resources that they have. Most films that come from India without major American studio support are already at a disadvantage because one, the American studios, they understand the lay of the land much better. We have to start figuring it out once we get there and slowly unravel the process. But, there are few people, there are the studios that are in America have been doing it year on year. So they know every nuance sort of turn and jab that they need to put in there to make sure their film gets ahead. So that's, I think, the sort of overall umbrella under which I would categorize it as a political campaign. I think what we sort of understood very early on was that it costs a lot of money, right? Everything costs money. First of all, everything costs money everywhere, but in the US and especially in LA during award season, everything costs a lot more money than it should. So you have, first of all, you have your travel, boarding, lodging, which is for all the people that you need to take from India, your key talent, producers, whoever that may be. You have to hire a publicist, which costs a lot of money, and you have to do many screenings. We did 52 screenings, and each screening needs to have F&B after. It needs to, because the only way you're going to attract voters to come to your screening is if you feed them and you give them some champagne after that to sit and discuss the film, because they get invited to so many screenings every single day that the only way to differentiate yourself is to have your screenings at specific places, kind of like at the Four Seasons in Los Angeles, which cost $45,000 for a single screening, or the Ross House, which also costs $50,000 for a screening. So I think that just the lack of resources puts us at a disadvantage. And another thing to note, and this is something that Nalin always says, is that it's not, you can't call it completely unfair, because it's not only that money talks. You still have to have a good film at the base of it. But that's the thing. Every film that's competing at that level is a good film. So then it's the money that really talks, right? So I think with us, one of the things that we realized is that we showed up probably 1 month too late to our campaign, because by then all the major publications, all the major editors and editorial sort of journalists had picked sort of their favorite films in the foreign language category. But I think sort of with Nalin's wide repertoire of people that he knows in LA, and obviously with the strength of the film, we were able to find our champions, and we made the shortlist. And it was the first time in 21 years that India has made the shortlist for the international feature category, which is a very competitive category because you have 91 films competing for 5 positions. So I think that's sort of the larger picture. Nalin, if you want to pick up from there, anything to add?
Yeah, I think truth is that, of course, money and time were the two most important factor, every movie, if you look at the shortlist or the submissions, were really great movie. It all becomes about campaigning and how much strength you have financially, and how much within that time span, how much influence and the hype you are able to generate. So it is like series of storytellers, involved in a blood sports of telling more stories about stories, to hype up their product, and everyone is at war telling stories about their movies and promoting it, and then say, oh, but my film is better because of certain reason. And then sometimes you want people to create their own stories. So you do live event. If you have a film about donkey, you bring a live donkey there. So people make up stories and tell other people, hey, I went to that screening, there was a live donkey there. So in a way, it's very, I would say, very violent in certain way emotionally. As a creative person, you really need to protect yourself. If not, you are finished. You come out and you are like doomed for several years of depression. So it can be super aggressive. It could be very uplifting. So therefore, on positive side, it was a great place to meet some amazing talent. Film editor, cinematographer, actor, producer, people who bond over your work and able to stay over and discuss, which normally you might not meet. People who have done big studio movies to all kind of cinema. So that was really great. But second thing is that the finance and support is a very big reality. Studios and streamers do dominate the Oscar season totally. 90% of, as you see, the nomination are studio or streamer supported, because they have not only 1 or 2 people, literally army of people working on award campaign, the strategists, the publicists, and they also make up their own stories to how to bring down other films. So there are smear campaign, soft smear campaign, So we saw all that from inside. Something were great, something were really sad and kind of disgusting in a way, unfair too. But then I guess when you get into vote and it becomes a power game, I don't think there is any other way. This bloodbath will be there. However, whatever rules you change, I would definitely say that somewhere as a filmmaker, and I'm sure Dheer and my team, we also felt little lonely because we didn't have a studio or streamer. But also, honestly, I think government of India should have some kind of a support, because in a way, wherever we went, we were representing Indian flag. People wrote India's entry. It's like sending an athlete to an Olympic game. It's pretty similar. So we were hoping that we should have some kind of a support system for future, that at least like many countries have. If you see South Korea, Thailand, France and Europe, of course, has a, like from the local embassy or cultural attaché, they all get involved in campaigning. And so I would definitely say in future, if we have to go there, we must have enough time and money. And second thing is some kind of a support from government will definitely help, because that carries weight. Because what government bring, film studios and filmmakers can't bring to the table. And if you see some of the government campaign like France or Italy, they were able to draw people, senators from Washington to watch the movie, things like that. And all that helps the Oscar campaign in the end.
That is so interesting. It sounds like the Oscar nomination process is a story unto itself and valid of a movie like Less Than Zero or something like that. A little dystopian, perhaps. I'm gonna ask Shrirupa Mitra to come on screen and ask a question. I think Pan, what you had said about Indian support is so right on. We maybe stealing your thunder, Shrirupa, but we've been working with the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting in India, trying to get a more codified activity, whether it's visitors or a minister or something of that nature. But just know that something that we're working on going forward. Shri, over to you, please. You're on mute.
I said thank you, Jay. Pleasure meeting all of you here. Quickly, I'll just introduce myself. I'm Shrirupa Mitra. I'm the Deputy Managing Director of USIBC. So like Jay said, we've been speaking with the Minister of Information and Broadcasting and his office. But I want to ask a more general question, which is, given your experience, in that landscape, what are the kind of convergences and ecosystems do you see between Hollywood and Indian cinema, not necessarily Bollywood, in terms of enhancing trade numbers? For instance, I'll break it down a little more. Can you envision India serving as a back, like when the IT boom happened, India was the back office, right? So can we think of skilling people in India, given the huge surplus of labor here and educated labor as well, something as a stream that goes into, if the government facilitates the visa, the work permits and all of that, can you envision that? Do you think that's a plausible thing if the government sort of steps forward, the skilling minister's office and the MIB? And second, my second question is exactly what you said just now. What kind of support, which you partly answered, that so when we go and speak, or when we I hope this conversation with you continues, and it's just so what kind of advocacy that can we possibly do, which will actually bring the two ecosystems together? I mean, closer, not together, closer.
I would say that there are two questions. One is, of course, the campaigning at the Oscar for the Indian entity. That's a separate thing altogether.
Separate, yes.
What you are talking about is the ecosystem. And as we have seen in the past, there were big studios running sweatshops in India, like Rhythm and Hues, and currently in Chennai, in Hyderabad and Mumbai, a lot of visual effects are being done in India. There are, some of the classics people don't know, but movies like Troy did entire jewelry, in Jaipur. You have armors for big blockbuster Hollywood movies are being made in Dehradun. So there are companies doing that. But what I feel where we lack is there is not a one window film commission kind of a facility in India. So every line producer, personally I have spoken, India is always their last choice of destination to go and make a production, which is sad indeed, because we do have a great technicians. We are at scale of any international movie production industry. But where we lack is we don't have a subsidy system. To get permissions are very difficult. And if let's just take a recent example of last 2 to 3 years. Every movie which has India as a subject being produced by Hollywood were shot in Thailand. They were shot in Chiang Mai. They created Indian street. They took Indian rickshaws there, auto rickshaw and saris, and they built whole India there. Part of sequences are shot in Sri Lanka. The reason being, those government have proper film commission. They facilitate producers from day one, the producer lands in the country. And in the end, if you really look at some of the interesting figures in small countries like Thailand, the turnover, just last year alone, I believe is around $3 billion of line production job, where they use Thai skill, Thai camera people, Thai technician, Thai stunt people for the shows, for the movies, for big budget movies like 13 Lives by Ron Howard, or a show like Disney show, Miss Marvel. There's just number of examples. And I'm sure it could be a great place for India, is much better place than Thailand or any other country, whether it's Saudi Arabia or Dubai, because coming to India, you can get snow-capped mountains, you can get desert, you can get Kerala. You have such variety of location by just going to one country. But very often, most of the line producers who are responsible for bringing these movies to India, you shouldn't focus on director, neither on producer. There is a post in film production called line producer who make ultimate decision that, oh, let's go to India. And those guys say, please don't go to India. I just spoke to the line producer of Tenet. It was a nightmare, not going there. Our budget tripled, double. And this is the honest reputation we must face by talking to not me or Dheer, but talking to 5 line producers and say, be honest, tell us why you didn't come back to India to shoot. Why are you not bringing projects back? And instead you are choosing, like Shantaram, there was, again, they did not shoot most of their sequences, they chose another country. So I would say that it could be a huge industry in India, because Indian technicians have gone to Malta and built a set for Gladiator. 250 carpenters went from Chennai to build a Gladiator Malta. Why not make that set in India? That means Hollywood appreciates our skill. Certain jewelers were asked to design necklace for Angelina Jolie. These are all, so they are going and picking and dealing at individual level and picking up all the skill which is required in costume design, in set design, in visual effects, in animation. But if all this comes under one consolidated industry, like they have done it in France, France is a great example, 35% rebate. So even Bollywood movie like Befikre goes there and spend 10 million euro, gets 3.5 million in cash. So, and in the end, the French industry is benefiting. Everyone is working in France. Every skilled person is employed, and even now, if you know the famous animation movies like Minions, Illumination Studio is all made in France, 100%.
Yeah. Thank you. That's very helpful. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Meta, do you remember this? We had a similar conversation, I want to say 18 months ago in one of our other media and entertainment, where we talked about cultural connectivity, and that as Indians and Indian Americans are much more steeped in American, whether it's comedy or culture or weather or geography, that India's much better able now to tie in the technical skills with that cultural knowledge to be able to help with things like advertising and marketing and so on. So I think there's a lot of opportunities. Gentlemen, I have one more question for you, and I'm going to ask our audience to see if they have any as well. My first time in India was 2003, and I had a distinct perception of Indian movies that have changed significantly over time. My initial perception was there was always some evil white guy, right? There was that evil white guy role that I thought maybe I can, play. Then secondly, there was always a lot of song and dance, and it was a very, very much sort of a set storyline, very human, but fairly consistent over and over again. And my perception of Indian movies has changed, where it's much more robust now. There's science fiction, there's all kinds of international romance and comedy. And I really have a very different perception of Indian cinema than when I originally was there, 20 years ago. Given that you have experienced Hollywood and been there a long time, have you seen a change in the trend line of how mainstream American cinema thinks about Indian media and entertainment differently? Is there a change?
Yeah, I would say certainly there's a change. I think there is lot more curiosity. I think there are a lot more Hollywood talent, visiting India, trying to figure out how can, they can explore project which will work in both countries. Not only producers, actors, screenwriters, and this was always there in the past, but right now suddenly there seems to be hope, maybe because of streaming platforms, and I do feel that the perception has changed quite a lot because Indian cinema has also changed. The kind of movie Dheer has already produced, the kind of movie I've directed. We are not alone. There are a whole lot of people in different parts of India doing very interesting kind of Indian cinema, Indian shows, and this attracts attention, from the entertainment industry and the studios. And not only that, a lot of Indians living abroad are also creating a new narrative in terms of what is an Indian cinema, but rooted in India, but global in its appeal. So it's changing, I mean, for sure. Maybe Dheer has something to add to that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I feel like the importance of India has never been stronger than it is now. Because for every streamer, their next 100 million subscribers can only come from India. Because most other markets are now saturated. Europe is saturated, the US is saturated, China is closed off. Korea and Japan and certain other Australia, certain other pockets are more or less saturated. India is still sort of that virgin land which has the ability to grow their subscriber base dynamically. There's also the idea that look at what's happened with Korean music, with K-pop music, and look at what's happened with Korean dramas and Korean films. It's sprouted an entire industry worth billions and billions of dollars, which both American studios and local Korean studios and entertainment companies are benefiting from. There's Afro beats that's coming out of Africa, which the whole world is listening to and has billions and billions of streams coming out on the music streaming platforms. India is still waiting for that sort of global revolution to happen for its art form, and there's no reason why it shouldn't. So I feel like how you have K-pop, there will one day be I-pop. How you have K-dramas, there will be Indian dramas, which will be true and authentic to our culture, but yet find sort of global audiences. So I think there's a sort of gold rush per se towards finding what that Indian identity is, and whoever gets to it will benefit from it.
Yeah, I think India also has an advantage because just the way the American entertainment industry is very closely linked to Australia or England, after all, we do have a different accent, but we are Anglophone country. So there is a lot more scope of creating, stories and big entertainment and studio movies and shows with India, because most of the urban Indian do follow American culture closely than, let's say, South Korea or even Japan.
Yeah, wonderful. Meta, the final word to you.
Oh, yeah, I was about to ask one last question before we wrap up. What's great about this Oscar season is you're also friends with a lot of the other nominees, and documentaries seem to have done very well this year. Why do you think, and last year for that matter, why do you think that we seem to have a strong presence in this category with the Academy? And Nalan, you are an Academy member, so I might ask you first about your thoughts on that and what do you think?
I would say many of these documentaries are there not because they are Indian, let's say by nationality, is because the subject, the creative concept they are dealing with. So certain subjects, if you look at the history of non-fiction or documentary with the Academy, the ecology, the women empowerment, this subject have always been very popular. And if you deal with underprivileged people and giving them power, have been always popular. So such documentaries have come from Latin America. If you look at some came from Africa. And similarly, the kind of subjects, if you look at 2 or 3 years, what Indian documentaries have dealt with, are either about environment or women empowerment in a rural India where they are trying to create their own journalistic career, or elephant or ecology. So there is certain kind of subject which I believe, now that I know a lot of academy members, they like those subjects. They like that people are aware about ecology, that they are aware about fighting for certain causes. And I think in America, there's always that need and desire to help people who are being oppressed or who have no voice, to give them a voice. So those documentaries will always take a forefront. But for example, if India made a documentary about a famous scientist, I would be very surprised it will reach nomination.
Interesting. Well, gentlemen, after you win on Sunday, inshallah, please remember us small people when you're rich and famous. This was a truly fascinating conversation, and I really mean it. It's the highlight of my week. No offense to intermediary guidelines and other important issues, but I found this incredibly interesting. I would like to invite our next segment speakers to come on video, Ashish Gowri and Aparna. Gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for your time today. Meta, I want to thank you for your leadership at USIBC. As they say, inshallah, maybe next year we will be able to bring an official Indian delegation to the Oscars. Maybe we can do something in advance to help with some of the nominee process. And from heartfelt, let me wish you all the luck on Sunday.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. All right.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Jay, Medha. Thanks for that very interesting session. We will move on to our next segment where we will be talking to Ashish. This will be a Q&A led by Gauri Gokhale. She leads our TMT practice at Nishit Desai Associates. I'll give a very brief introduction of Ashish, and then we can take it from there. So Ashish is the founder of Punaryog Art Vision Private Limited, chairman of FICCI's AVGC Forum, member of the AVGC Promotion Task Force formed by the Government of India, and governing council member of the Media and Entertainment Skills Council. During his career, Ashish has set up world-class animation studios in India, created original animated content, as well as completed and marketed several animation films for Hollywood studios. He has extensively engaged with AVGC policymakers in India at central and state levels, which has resulted in successful implementation of policies in various states, including Maharashtra, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, and many others. He has designed the AVGC curriculum for over 17 universities and many standalone institutions. He is also a mentor to budding artists and has organized workshops for parents and youth in over 70 cities to promote careers in AVGC. Ashish, welcome and thanks a lot for joining us. I'll
Thanks a lot.
request Gauri to take over from here.
Thanks a lot, Aparna.
Thanks, Aparna. Thanks, Ashish, for joining this at such a short notice. We always appreciate your participation in all our webinars and sessions.
Thanks.
I know for a fact that you and your team have been working relentlessly on this particular AVCG policy, AVCG policy over last pandemic. I know that during pandemic you have been burning your midnight oil as well for this particular policy. So without much ado, I hand it over to you to sort of walk us through what are the major suggestions that the task force has suggested for this sector. As also, since we are talking, with the US audience, what are the opportunities that you see? Of course, in the earlier segment, there were certain discussion points on the opportunities, but especially for this particular sector, what are the opportunities that you see for Indo-US collaboration? So over to you, Ashish. And also, as Aparna mentioned, I guess there have been certain developments even at the state level. So maybe you could even walk us through that as well.
Yeah. Thanks, Gauri, and a very good morning to most of our friends from the US, and good evening to friends from India. Well, actually, I would like to thank Nishit Desai in the US, team to put this together. Uh, the journey for India literally began in 1995-96, as the dot-com was happening, same time the animation was getting set up. Although the dot-com burst happened, but animation stayed and then grew up into visual effects, gaming, and now we are calling something called as an XR, which is a combination of AR, VR, MR, and all the things put together, and leading into metaverse and many other different, experiential zones that we call it, even the experiential entertainment that's, gearing up. We call it immersive experience at some time. And, uh, you know, the issue was that India was always close to the US. And in 1999, animation, gaming, visual effects, and comics was placed under the IT-enabled services in the charter of the Industries Ministry, and that's how the IT Ministry was later on formed. But then uh, we uh, we actually got all the benefits that the IT industry got, because we were a part of the software technology parks of India, and also under the ITEA scheme. And that's where we actually worked as a support system and the service hub to most of the American studios, maybe some of the European and studios from the UK and Japan. But eventually, as we grew, uh, it became evident that India itself was growing on animation, and the Indian animation ecosystem and the sheer number of kids who were watching animation as they grew up in India were exponential. And we had the huge demand for creating original intellectual property in India, and actually look at India centric content to start with, and then look at content that would actually resonate with the global audience. And all these things have happened over the last 2 decades of a life cycle of animation, uh, content creation, and the services that we have put together in India. Although there have been quite a few ups and downs, because of there was a downturn in 2009, and then there was a slag in 2014. But because we had a unique balance of services business and the creation of Indian IP, I think most of the studios survived those ups and downs, and actually came up with a much better solution pattern and the production pipelines and optimized pipelines, which actually today puts India into a very unique position. We actually can create content as probably the cheapest in the world in terms of end-to-end creation, and still remain entertaining, and has a great TRP ratings for viewership. Whereas when it comes to supporting the best quality visual effects or 3D animation, uh, the people who cared for quality always stayed with India. And that's the kind of a signature line that has been created, because we believed in the complete formation of our art forms, and the the complete ecosystem that was supported between arts and the technology together, and the experience that people had here in terms of handling things technically was remarkable. And that's why what we realize as an industry is that we need to do a lot more in terms of how to build this as an ecosystem, and the whole category needed to develop itself. And unlike most of the other countries where media and entertainment is concentrated around one or two cities, India has filmmaking ability in more than 15 states of India. India has 29 states, and these states have their own language, content creation ecosystem, and distribution ecosystem. So they make their own films in that language. They also make their own content in television. Now they also make their own content on radio, as well as on the OTT platforms. And that's why it demanded that many of these states in India, who always were inspired to become film states for creation of films and uh, getting new films and getting others to come and shoot into their state. Those dreams came to light when the animation gaming visual effects started growing up, because they realized that setting up post production and animation visual effects hubs would definitely get the media and entertainment piece to their state, and the job creation for their youth would happen in the same state. And that's how the complete development of uh, uh, a ecosystem, right from education, skilling, and getting a job in the same vicinity, is something which started becoming a reality from 2011-12 onwards. India had opened up to the university framework, where we had a state private university allowed, and there were national universities, there were state universities, and now we had state private universities. And the ecosystem of these universities were open because they were allowed to become center of excellences. They were allowed to actually have an autonomous curriculum, and they were then interested in creating creative programs and specialized programs, whereby we can actually directly skill uh, people to come into into the career really fast. Although India is 109 years in cinema, 70 plus years in television, and maybe 5 years in OTT. The challenge was that most of the people who worked, more than a million people who worked on productions, have never gone to a formal program, because we had handful of institutions teaching filmmaking, production, acting, and all. Uh, but in the last 2 decades, we have seen a surge of it, especially in the last decade. As I said, the universities were open up, and India also had the national education policy, which actually gave a level playing field for creative arts, performing arts, design, and sports at par with science and commerce. And that opened up the whole opportunity, right from the school to the university, and also the non-conventional method where people learn these art forms historically in their own cultures, and then they come and adapt that to produce best of the shows, because their foundation is already there. And that's gave us an idea that we should actually talk to the government to see how this category can actually grow. And then we realized that today we have 200,000 people who are professionally trained in India in the animation, visual effects, gaming, and comics ecosystem, and who have built this industry meticulously in the last 2.5 decades or so. And then we looked at during the lockdown, as we spoke to the government, and we said that we would put a document together. And government said, why don't you guys work as a group? And we set up a group of 140. And during the lockdown, every day between 9 and 12 in the night, we used to be on the Zoom call and set up this whole agenda, where we took an assessment that India in the next 10 years, maybe about 2032, we will be about 2 million, smart workforce only in the AVGC and AR or VR sector. And how do we really get there? So we created a pyramid that the people coming from the small tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 towns, they come with a non-conventional, education or skilling, and they join the bottom of the pyramid. And then how do we really talk to the universities, create these curriculums, and look at the middle of the pyramid, and how do we really talk to the Indian Institute of Technologies and the design schools to really look at the top of the pyramid with the masters, and also create a research program in this space. And there were too many hurdles. It was not easy. And I think we have cracked a lot of it, because UGC had put up a guideline that you have to be masters to teach an undergrad, and you have to be a PhD to teach a master's. But we neither had undergrad course nor we had a master's course. So how do we really get going? And then looking at our request and several deliberations, they agreed to, create a special section whereby a professor of practice faculty of practice is allowed, and anybody who make a film or a game or create world-class visual effects can come and teach. And I think that's was a big boom to the industry. So what we did is that we created a state-wise framework where at the starting point we set up an incubator in the university. That's where we actually get the ecosystem for youngsters to get a direct connect program. And then we created something called as a AVGC Park, which is a standalone building which is dedicated to animation, gaming, visual effects. And that is been taken up by many states as AVGC parks. And then we created something called as AVGC clusters. So right near where the films are made, we made a request to the government and looked at creating a cluster whereby it's a state and a private kind of real estate arrangement whereby all studios can be housed with a common facility in terms of render farms and talent pool, and they can draw from the talent pool. And we have common studios for the sound and motion capture and rest of the things, where the center of excellence, the education, and the studio ecosystem is at all at one cluster. And then we created another fourth layer to it, which is called as an art village, which is into some 1,000 acres of land, where a complete ecosystem, right from the school to university to working studios to place to stay for all these artists, is been created. And it's 360-degree approach to the whole segment. And it is a 365 days performance village. So there are people who are performing every day, whether it's music, drama, dance, singing, and creating films. At the same time, getting educated and finding your interest in any art form. So that's the art village concept that we wrote. And now, the government of India set up an AVGC task force, which was announced in the budget of 2022 February. And on 8th of April 2022, they set up this AVGC promotion task force, where we were given an assignment. We were 7 people from the industry, and we had very smart and very capable officers and supporting ministers from INB ministry, because the whole lead was taken by INB ministry. But we had all secretaries from education ministry, the skills ministry, the commerce and industries ministry, the IT ministry, and we kept on meeting the finance ministry as well. And we have a nodal body which is looking into the complete growth pathways, is the Niti Aayog. And we also did several presentations to Niti Aayog, which was once time it was called a planning commission. Now it's called Niti Aayog. But I think it's a 360-degree approach, where we looked at where will we reach with. We looked at the whole approach with 2 lenses. One is the domestic market and international market. The second was also looked into with 2 lenses. One is building services business versus creating IP from India. And then also looked at what could be a co-production ecosystem that India can have, because India signed around 16 co-production treaties in the last 8 years. But we are trying to help the government to set up a framework to execute those co-production treaties in the right form. At the same time, how do you create a mechanism of funding the co-productions? And then we also came up with a whole lot of other things, something that we looked at as an incentive and something we looked at as an enabler for the industry to really grow. And I think looking at all this listing, we then looked at every single vertical within AVGC XR, that is animation vertical, the visual effects vertical. The visual effects has a very peculiar nature of companies, because 100% work that they do is a services work. Unless until they become a part of the film and fund a film, it doesn't become an IP for them. And then we had gaming ecosystem. Gaming has as many as 7 verticals within the gaming. We had mobile gaming, we had console gaming, we had PC gaming, we had fantasy gaming, we had esports, and then we had the rummy and poker and the whole lot of things. And then how do you really put that whole jigsaw puzzle together? And then we had AR, VR, and XR, which are also attached to the gaming companies as well as the animation companies. And some of them actually specialize into a standalone company. So looking at doing justice to this and also attracting foreign direct investment, the government of India has already opened 100% route for foreign direct investment for starting any of the AVGC XR company in India. So you can come and start a company. If you are 100% export company, you can actually be a part of any special economic zone where we have taxation benefits, or you can be a part of AVGC park or an IT park where you can set it up wherever there are skills. And we could then generate as many as 11 states to have a separate animation gaming policy. And that's how, because all implementation has to happen in the state. So we are able to now look at encouraging states to form their own private equity fund with a support with different banks, so that we are able to support the studio in that particular state. And I think that's the winning point that we have. So on one hand, we looked at the infrastructure. On one hand, we looked at the skilling and manpower. And one hand, we looked at the funding issues and creating an enabling situation. But at the same time, we really looked at how do you, present yourself within your own country, and how do you present yourself outside the country. So we listed all the major festivals and conferences across, and the markets across the globe. And we discussed with the government that we need to be present every year into maybe 10 to 12 markets for sure, as an Indian pavilion. And that's where you see the presence of Indian studios. And even the government has funded it to look at that. There is something called a Services Promotion Council of India. They have also become active, and we have been able to put this Indian pavilions into most of the markets of media and entertainment, whether it's the Cannes Film Festival or the Toronto International Film Festival or MIPCOM, MIPTV or SIGGRAPH, or you name it. And recently we had a lot of awards won into BAFTA as well as in the Kids Screen in Miami just about a month ago. So it's overall development of the category is what I'm hinting at. Of course, the Film Facilitation Office also supported AVGC in a big way, because we also listed all AVGC companies state-wise on the Film Facilitation website. And now India realizes that they need to really look at this as a major opportunity, as told by Nalin as well. We we are very positive about this development, that now it's been handed over to Invest India, and Invest India would look at the film facilitation within India, and look at all the aspects of the creating content in India, whether it's your permissions. It's become a lot more easier than what people think. I work very closely with the state of Madhya Pradesh, state of Maharashtra, state of Gujarat. We are doing very big films in Karnataka and Telangana and Tamil Nadu, West Bengal, and it's become much easier for us to shoot and look at a visual effects ecosystem in the same location, because we are now able to get visual effects supervisors in every state, and they are able to actually finish the work as the shoots are happening in the same state. And I think that's a very positive sign. And I believe in the next 10 years, in terms of international production hub, India would be at par with uh, any major hubs all over the world. Of course, in terms of quality, we are still supplying the best quality, and we are already delivering the best quality. But in terms of the number of studios in India, probably will be highest across the globe in the next 10 years. And in terms of education ecosystem, I believe we with the world-class facilities that the state private universities and the national universities and the center of excellences that have been set up, I think in terms of media and entertainment education, as well as in terms of AVGC XR education, in the next 5 years, you will start seeing that uh, most of the Indian kids would not blink their eye, uh, but they would plan from the school days to come and find a pathway to make a career. More so, we have looked at an analysis that many countries would send their kids to India to study in this space because we have probably the best mix of the culture and the technology and the artistic forms. And I think as we are formalizing them, we are looking at three levels of foundation programs. One is the art and performing arts foundation for people coming into this industry and leading into the digital ecosystem from there. We are looking at a filmmaking foundation and then making a career into animation visual effects. And we are also looking at the design foundation and then coming and making a career so that people can actually go into the game design and even the character design and the environment design in a different way. So we are looking at having a mix and match of all these foundations, and as we get the foundation right, the specialization for kids will become a very strong footing for them to actually jump directly into the industry. And I think this is where we believe today that India is well poised, and we hope that 2023 will see the National Center of Excellence in Mumbai coming up. 2023 will also see the unveiling of the policy in India, and there are 5 states who didn't have a policy have approached us in the last 2 months, and we are now working with those states to form a policy. So we will be actually probably closer to 14 to 15 states in 2023 will have active animation gaming policy.
Super. So thanks Ashish for that complete background, and I'm sure the members who are present here and those who will listen to your talk later will benefit substantially from your inputs and the opportunities also that the US audience will see, in all the areas that you mentioned. It's a great takeaway for all of us, Jay, for your team as well, to see where all we can collaborate, with the task force members. So thanks a lot, Ashish. We will now need to quickly move to the next segment. But if you can stay on, and if there are audience questions, we quickly can take them later. So if we could have NDA team members quickly on screen, we will also deal with some of the aspects that Ashish briefly mentioned slightly in more detail, because those are some of the important points. So quickly moving on. Aparna, if you could just walk us through, the aspects that some of the other members mentioned, as well as Ashish, of shooting in India, some of the initiatives that the government of India has taken, and where some work still needs to be done. Maybe that is something I'll deal with as well quickly.
Right. So I'll first of all deal with the 2 cash incentive schemes that were announced in 2022. Like Pan said, some other countries also have similar schemes. So in 2022, the Indian government introduced these 2 schemes. One was for shooting foreign films in India, and the other one was for co-production arrangements between Indian and foreign producers. Both are cash schemes, which basically means, and what they provided for is that 30% of the qualifying expenditure for the project, up to about USD 2600 to whatever that number is on screen, can be claimed as reimbursement. The schemes are being facilitated by the Film Facilitation Office right now, and which now operates under Invest India. We have been informed by the Film Facilitation Office that there are several applications that have been filed for availing these incentive schemes, and the FFO has started granting approvals for these schemes. Other than this, I think there are some aspects that have to be kept in mind while filming in India. There are other permissions that are required when foreign entities and foreign production houses are filming in India. And these primarily the permission for filming a project in India is handled by the FFO. The application can be filed by either the foreign producer themselves or through an Indian line producer. Other than that, there are specific permissions required for several other aspects. For instance, for specific locations, there may be permissions that are required. In some cases, these permissions will be required from state authorities. There are also separate permissions that will be required for if there are animals being used in the films, if drones are used in the film, then there are separate permissions that will be required. One more aspect I think which is very important, while this is currently in draft form, but the National Commission for Protection of Child Rights did release certain draft regulations, draft guidelines for participation of children in the entertainment industry. And these the guidelines do contain several conditions and prohibitions in relation to having children as part of film projects or any projects in the industry. Some of these including registration of the child artist with the district magistrate, having disclaimers stating that no abuse or neglect of the child has been caused. There are other some slightly vague aspects of the guidelines, to which there was quite a bit of pushback when these were published. But yeah, something to maybe look out for in case this actually comes in and gets enacted.
Thanks, Aparna. I think the other learnings that we had, in fact, our team extensively work on Shantaram and Tenet project that were mentioned before, and we had a lot of learnings even on the taxation side. And there are certain areas which, in fact, we have also made a representation to the ministry on easing out of some of the tax-related provisions, whether it is goods and services tax or whether it is, tax deducted at source for the foreign crew. There are certain vague provisions out there. So when the foreign producers are creating those arrangements with the Indian producers or line producers, some of these elements and aspects also have to be taken into account. Even as also the the visa related issues when you have to shoot in India, the what type of visa is required. So some of these things we thought it's good to have a laundry list for all of you to consider as and when some of you may want to sort of look at putting projects together in India. I think the next aspect that Ashish did allude to was on the gaming side, and we have substantial updates. Maybe some of those were discussed before in earlier updates, but we do want to sort of comment upon where is the industry going or where the regulation is headed and what the industry needs to further do in relation to the gaming. So over to you, Tanisha, for a quick snapshot.
Hi, all. So I think, as Ashish mentioned, it's a very exciting time for the Indian gaming industry. It's one of the highest growth industries within the media and entertainment sector. So just to give a sort of overview, in the last couple of years, the central law for the online gaming industry is something that the industry has really been pushing for, because currently betting and gambling, even skill gaming, is legislated by the states under the current framework, which was resulting in a lot of state-wise uncertainties for businesses. So last year, two ministries were vested in charge of online gaming and esports, which is the MeitY and the Ministry of Sports, respectively. And sort of 1 week after this notification came out, there were certain proposed rules introduced for the online gaming industry through amendments to the intermediary guidelines, right? So these rules sort of aim to regulate online gaming platforms, as well as platforms that host or advertise online games or advertisements of online games for some sort of consideration. So very briefly, I'll just sort of touch upon some of the the framework of these rules and some of the key obligations. It's a very sort of light touch co-regulatory framework between the ministry and the self-regulatory bodies, which is again something that the industry is sort of very happy about, that it's not too prescriptive in nature. In terms of the actual regulations, I think there is a lot of emphasis on player protection under the proposed regulations, in terms of protection of player deposits, mandatory disclosures which need to be made to players, grievance redressal mechanism, as well as certain other aspects. Also, and under the framework, the gaming businesses have to get their online games registered, with registered self-regulatory bodies, and there's a particular mechanism for that prescribed under the rules. Interestingly, the rules also require online gaming businesses to get no bot and an RNG certificate, because one of the bigger concerns in the last couple of years has been the issue of tampering with the software on online gaming platforms, as well as deploying bots to compete with players on the platform, and those players losing to those bots. So those type of obligations have been come in to specifically address those issues. In terms of the intermediary platforms, and by that I'm talking about, for example, social media platforms that sort of advertise online games, or other similar platforms. Those platforms under the proposed rules are required to ascertain that the online games are registered and verify the fact of the registration with the self-regulatory bodies before they sort of publish those games or advertisements of online games on their platforms, right? So that's just quick overview about what's currently regulated under the rules. Another interesting aspect is currently casual games, and games which are sort of free to play, where there's no money in and no money out, are not currently regulated under the rules. However, MeitY has said that they may apply some or all of the obligations under these rules to even free to play games. And what we have been hearing is that there may be some sort of obligations introduced even in relation to casual games, to address aspects such as addiction, as well as minors sort of depositing money on these platforms in an unauthorized manner. So we may see those regulations also coming up as well. In terms of the implementation of these rules, right? So as I mentioned, largely the industry is very happy with those rules. In fact, the industry had been self-regulated in the absence of regulations in the last couple of years, and the framework sort of blesses that self-regulatory mechanism. That being said, there are some issues and ambiguities which would continue, and some issues which would need to be resolved even under the rules currently. One of the bigger aspects is the fact that these rules will not replace the current state-wise framework. So to that extent, the state-wise uncertainty will continue for the online gaming businesses. So even if online gaming platforms have registered their games through the mechanism under these rules, a state may still take a contrary view and say that, hey, these games are not allowed under my state law, right? A second important issue is, determining which games are games of skill, and how to determine whether a game is a game of skill or not. There will have to be some sort of objective methodology to be evolved, perhaps on the basis of data tests or something like that. That is also something, which remains to be seen, how the SRBs will sort of look at it. Apart from that, this has been a sort of thorny issue for the online gaming platforms, is the KYC obligations which are introduced under the rules. So how it works currently is that the online gaming platforms, although they do KYC, they do it at the time of withdrawal of winnings. What the rules prescribe is that the KYC will be done at the time of opening of the account. And second of all, the actual standard of KYC which is prescribed is a very sort of stringent KYC obligations which are imposed by the RBI on banks, NBFCs, highly regulated entities, right? And there is no sort of thresholds prescribed under the rules in terms of even small online gaming platforms will have to comply with those sort of onerous obligations. So, that is also something which needs to be looked at. One sort of solution which the industry has been proposing is to have a sort of graded approach, similar to how it's followed in the case of, prepaid instruments, where small PPIs have simpler KYC as opposed to, PPIs dealing with higher amounts of money. So, that is one of the key issues from a business perspective for the operators. Apart from this, the rules also sort of require self-verification of users. So the players will come onto the platform, and the platforms are required to enable self-verification of the users through mobile OTP. Now, arguably, if you are already doing KYC of the players, also having this additional feature which they have to comply with seems a bit onerous, and it would require the platforms to sort of develop additional feature which may be difficult for the startups to do. So these are just a couple of the main issues which with the rules. I just one last point is that the other thing which would need to sort of be further developed is the distinction between esports and online games. Right now, there are two separate ministries which are given in charge of these industries, but there is no clarity as to the difference between these two, and whether there is some amount of overlap. So, if anyone has any thoughts on that or any inputs on that, we'd love to hear from you. So yeah,
thanks, Anisha. In fact, when we spoke with some of the UK lawyers on this very point, we understood, and Ashish, this is input for you, that that there is no still clarity, and I know we have had those discussions on where does one draw the line. So we need to wait and watch if there is any turf war between the two ministries going forward. So with that, I think let's just quickly move on. I know we have few minutes left, but move on to the more traditional industry, which is broadcasting, which has had certain court cases in the recent past with the new tariff order. I know some of you may be already aware, I'm not very sure that whether the audience, is clued on what is happening in the court case currently. So we thought we'll give a quick 1 minute snapshot on where things are insofar as the broadcasting industry, because though we do have OTT proliferation, broadcasting still remains as one of the prominent industry. We are yet to reach cut the cord situation, at least throughout the country, maybe in the metros we have. But over to you, Puru, to give a quick update on where we are. We just had the court hearing couple of days back, so maybe you just want to give an update there.
Sure. So I'll just keep it brief and to the dispute that is going on in court. As we know, there has been a disagreement between broadcasters and cable operators over pricing, and the charges that are charged by both of these sets of service providers, which are bundled to the consumers. The issue in court right now is regarding an amendment to these pricing guidelines, wherein a cap has been introduced to how much a channel can be priced as part of a bouquet. The cable operators do not want this new amendment to be implemented, and they have challenged it. The Association of Cable Operators have challenged it before the Kerala High Court, as on the grounds that it is manifestly arbitrary and consumer choice is being affected as to whether a consumer can, is forced to choose a la carte channels less and channels which are as part of a bouquet more. And the Association of Distributors or Broadcasters are pushing for these changes to be implemented and revised contracts to be signed with the cable operators. So that's the issue right now. As Gauri said, the arguments have been completed before the Kerala High Court on this challenge of the amendment, and we are the judgment is reserved, although it's been reserved as of day before yesterday, 7th of March, and we are awaiting whether the judgment will stay the amendment or will make the amendment will uphold the amendment, and we'll see whether cable operators will be enforcing previous offers or previous rates, or whether the amendment comes into force.
Great.
Jay, we do have a small update on advertising, but maybe since we are running out of time, we could probably circulate to the members and those who may have additional questions in relation to the advertising related updates. Maybe we can separately deal with those. But I think we could probably move on to the question answer segment, since we have Ashish, presence of Ashish also here. If you could take a few questions at this stage.
Great. If we could ask the speakers to come on screen as well. But in the meantime, Puru, I have a question for you and sort of the NTO3. Like, let's keep it simple, right? I mean, we know that there's a debate over pricing, that is the local broadcasters and then the content providers. Who wins, who loses, right? Is it that simple, or is it much more nuanced?
It is not that simple. In fact, while the Kerala High Court proceedings were going on, a few cable operators did agree to sign the revised contracts with the revised rates. So it's kind of, even before the judicial order comes, that it has gone either ways. But of course, ultimately, the consumer's interest will take importance, because there have been actually instances. Cricket fans here on this call would know that I think just sometime during the India-Australia game, some of the broadcast had been cut off because of this dispute. So ultimately, consumer interest will take precedence. So it is clearly not as black and white as who will win.
Thank you. Subi, you have a question? Do you want to come on screen and ask it, or do you like me to share it?
Hi, Jay. Thank you so much. Jay, I'm still traveling. We're preparing for the US India CEO Forum. So just keeping my video off, really wanted to thank you. And Ashish, that was absolutely stellar. Thank you for being our evangelist and our champion. Also, Gauri, Tanisha, great work. Just one small question, because this bothers all of us and it throws us into uncertainty. Because the governments put us in the budget as far as AVGC is concerned, and then we have a really supporting development from a central framework. From the GST lens, this one's to you, Gauri, and to you, Ashish. How do you see us reconciling? Because to be put in the same bracket as horse racing and casinos, and then to look at building an entire ecosystem where, attracting talent becomes a challenge. And then there's a huge perception battle the moment you've put into the 28% bracket and, the whole image of a sin. So TDS, there's been some development, and Gauri also on the GST bit, and then the Gamescraft matter. So just some thoughts on these three aspects. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Subi. Let me quickly deal with the GST, sort of standoff that we have here in India. And we have seen even internationally the markets where you have a robust tax structure. When I say robust, I mean the tax structure that supports the industry, right? That is where the industry really grows, a legitimate industry grows well. Otherwise, you do have situation where you have underground operators who are able to offer their services at a much, commercially beneficial sort of rates to the, to the gamers. Then the gamers do go underground. So unfortunately, we do have a standoff here. Currently, we don't see where it is going. But on the GST, the question really is, if there is a platform charging 10 rupee as a service fee on a particular table, where the table is of 100 rupees, whether the GST should be charged on the entire 100 or only on rupees 10. Thus far, the industry has been paying only on rupees 10 as per their interpretation. And the question is, what rate? The government is looking at 28%, and the industry is really looking at 18%. So that is where, unfortunately, and my personal view, it has to be 18% at it on the 10 rupee. And I hope, Ashish, you can take this back to the government as well, because I don't know why, it's months and months when you could turn around the AVGC task force, such a detailed, paper, sort of almost overnight. Why is, a government not taking a supportive measure for the industry on this specific issue? On the TDS, and on the TDS, we do have an update on the online gaming sort of operators. Again, 30% on the winnings, net winnings, and we are yet to see what is the definition of net winning. I hope it is the, the winning minus the stake. But there again, unfortunately, I think the government has overlooked the fact that in India there are very micro transactions, right? So people play for 300-400 rupees per month, and then to charge, the tax right from the first penny of your winning, it's quite onerous. The way they have for the physical world 10,000 as a limit, there should have been some limit, annual limit, after which, the TDS should have been charged. These are my immediate comments, but Ashish, if you want to add anything, would love to hear your thoughts.
No, I think the representations from the industry have been, right. Initially they were divided because, not uh, all the categories within the gaming were affected. But as the consolidation happens, and as you see that the the interaction with the industry and the government is pretty intense, and we are looking at, as you know, that we have suggested Indian Digital Gaming Board, which will not only look at the classification of games to deciding whether it's skill or chance, and even it will have the check on the software and the intentions of the software. So I think when we put this whole mechanism together, I think they will be better controlled, because in the government's mind at this point in time, the consumer protection is at the prime. And although there is a B2C connect between the gaming companies and the consumers, while all other content areas, there is a mediator like a distributor or a platform or whatever. This is one thing which grows exponentially. And Indian mobile ecosystem is pretty solid. We have 600 million active smartphone users today, and in the next couple of years, they're estimating will be about 900 million active smartphone users, and that's a big number, and access to the games. And I think this churn would definitely kind of bring the rationalization as we move forward. But I believe before it comes to the legitimate or what I would say the desired taxation framework as far as GST is concerned, and even if you've seen, we dealt with something called as in-app purchases within gaming, and that was also quite a lot of debate. But then those things could be solved with the dialogue. So I think this dialogue will continue, and I think in a year or two this will stabilize, because government also is concerned about how do we really do the self-regulation plus a mix of forming a board which can be responsible for making sure that the industry grows, category grows, at the same time the exchequer is not losing, uh, and on the whole the consumer protection is taken care of in a larger way. So I think it's a big responsibility as far as the government is concerned, and there are many departments which are dealing with this. And I think it's not only India. There are many countries who are dabbling with the gaming ecosystem, and the Indian structure, the the lottery and the gambling law is a state law. So what happens is that every state looks at it very differently, and those laws are set up with something which was called as lottery at one point in time, which was a physical lottery. Now we are in a digital world, and I think once the national policy gets its shape, the industry will have to go and do a state-to-state run with the state governments, and present it to them in a way that there is a conducive change within the policy at the state level as well, so that there is a win-win situation for the industry, the consumers of the game, and also the government.
Ashish, just for the sake of time, let's ask one last question. We wouldn't want to end on an issue of taxes, particularly in such an exciting segment. So we heard from Pan that the nature of movies is changing with onlines and shorts and things of that nature. We've heard that gaming is changing as well, just in how it's online platforms and the scale and the ease of the games being pushed out to the marketplace by younger kids and so forth. But something we didn't reference is the metaverse. And the metaverse is clearly a new entertainment style. Whether it has a video component was to be seen, whether it has a gaming component is a clear possibility. How did your committee think about the metaverse? Is it in the report? Is it not in the report? Is it segmented? What's your just short take, maybe a 2-minute comment, sort of final word on a new media and entertainment technology that might be disruptive to many of the types of entertainment segments that we've spoken about today? So over to you, sir.
Yes, so we did actually deliberate a lot on the metaverse, and the metaverse. We realized that it can be defined in many ways. In fact, even the companies creating their own consumer ecosystem can also be converted to metaverse. To there are generic metaverse that are getting built, and uh, the the complete ecosystem realized that when we do an AVGC XR, although all these components also lead to be a part of the metaverse itself, it will always remain a derivative of what you're trying to create at multiple worlds that you create. And we felt that the present world and the metaverse as a world will have to have to be thought through out of the purview of this particular policy. And that's why we are also deliberating as an industry, and also talking to the government actively in terms of how do you really look at metaverse as a as a universal truth, where taxation and also regulation can become a part, because it is defined by a different set of rules altogether. And now we had a very interesting session at Nishit Desai a few months ago on the same subject. But I think there are two things to be realized. One is that the regulation and the law, whether you preempt it and make it, or you make it as a catch up. Uh, any government would like to look at it as a catch up, because there has to be some experience to really see what direction these things are going into. But let me tell you one thing, that at this juncture, uh, the government is very actively talking to all the creators of metaverse and the industry, and the legal ecosystem like Gauri and team, and they are very actively looking at this space. And I believe 2024-25 would be probably the turn, as we close with the gaming regulation and self-regulation ecosystem, what we are able to evolve. In fact, there's a great job in terms of the OTTs and the social media, and I think it was a real shakeup, but then it's kind of streamlined quite well. And I think the gaming industry would happen the same way, and followed by the metaverse eventually.
Interesting.
So I think it's a progression, but I think good thing is that they're all talking to each other,
Right.
and
Right.
good thing is that they are watching every move. I think both these things would help the category to grow at the end.
Jay, if I may just add quickly to what Ashish said, in fact, the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, they have a research, sort of department which has been set up. And one of the first projects they took up was understanding of metaverse. So they invited our team to set up a very detailed presentation. The chairman of TRAI was personally with us through the day. Once their own team understood it, they invited all the other departments of the government and made us present again before them. So the government, various departments of the governments were present. So all of them are trying to understand, learn, and as Ashish rightly said, it's a wait and watch at present. Uh, Also, what we have quickly done is we have put a Jay in the chat box. We have put our paper on metaverse. So if your members want to take benefit of that paper where we have discussed also some of the Indian laws that may affect. It may be a good idea or a good weekend reading as well.
Wonderful. Well, clearly we have touched upon a topic of great interest. I find that when you run long with solid, interesting information, time flies. Clearly, we need to do this again. Therefore, I'm really pleased to just share at the bottom of the hour that we're going to be having a steady state of conversations with our knowledge partners at Nishit Desai Associates, and I look forward to future iterations. Let me thank our speakers again at the top of the hour around the Oscars. we had Pan and Deer and Meta. And then I want to thank the Nishis Desai team, of course, Gary, Aparna, Tanisha, and Puru. And Ashish, I also want to thank you, sir, for your valuable time, giving us insight into what the government's looking at. We'd like to invite you back on this platform. Maybe we can take one of those exciting segments or comics or graphics or something and dive a little bit deeper. But with that, let me wish everybody again a belated Holi and a very good night in India. And for those in the United States and elsewhere, enjoy the rest of your day. We will post this online and we'll make the slides available to our members. So thank you again and have a good night.
Thank you. Good night and good day to all of you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye now.